Hello class, Mr. McCrae here doing another video. This time I'm doing it on X and Y intercept. So in the series of graphing, basically just want to talk about we've talked about rate of change and initial value. Now we're going to talk about X and Y intercept so we can get an understanding of how that's going to look for us, okay? So a couple of things about the X and Y intercept is basically we're going to look at it in terms of the graph and where the quarter point is. Then we're going to look at it in terms of the equation. How do I determine that X and Y intercept? And the final last thing is we're going to take it all together from the equation, get the X and Y intercept, and graph the line. Okay. So there's a couple of things that we need to know. Obviously, number one is x-intercept. What is that? That's basically where the graph line crosses the x-axis, okay? And the y-intercept is where the graph line crosses the y-axis. Pretty easy, okay? We all know that, so I'm not going to go over that too much. Now, the other one is correlation, okay? Correlation is another word that we're going to be using. Basically, it should be a positive with negative correlation. So that basic correlation means is how is the graph going? Is it going upwards? Is it going downwards? And how do you determine that? So it's positive. If you look left to right from this way and it's going up at a steep climb, that would be a positive correlation. That would be a positive correlation. Now, if there's negative correlation, basically it would start at one point and it would continue to sink down at some other point. So like from quadrant 2 to quadrant 1, or it could be in quadrant 2, or quadrant 4, and then goes into quadrant 4 or whatever. So again, that would be a negative correlation. So you'll see that in the graph as I show it along in the process. Okay, so let's do example problems. So these are the first one. These are basically all we're doing is tell me where the x-intercept is and the y-intercept. Okay, so those are the two things you have to do. Okay, and I have to tell them the coordinate point. So we said the x-intercept is where it crosses the graph line in the x-axis, so it crosses at this point right here, and then the y-axis it crosses at this point right here. Pretty easy to do. So we start from the origin. How many spaces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 6 spaces over on the right, so there'd be coordinate point 6. Okay, and the parentheses, and the other one, and let's see, and it would be 6, 0 because there's no other point on the y-axis at this point. So that would be the coordinate point for the x-intercept. Now the y-intercept is 0 from the front because that would be the x, and the other one would be how many down? 1, 2. So that'd be negative 2. So that would be the y-intercept. And that's all you have to do in that situation. Pretty easy. Just basically find the points and put them in. Now the question is this a positive or negative correlation? Well, looking left to right, it's going upwards. Even though it's going off the idea, if we started here, we're going to continue every time. We're going to continue to march upwards every time. So therefore, this is a positive correlation. It's a positive correlation. Okay, so that's how it would look. Positive. If I ask you that question, you should know. Positive correlation. All right, let's look at the next one. So we have a straight line here. Okay, and we have an x and y intercept. So if we're a straight line, we don't have an x-intercept because it doesn't cross the x-axis at any point. So that would be 0. Okay, actually, sorry, let's just make it an x. Let me get an eraser out here. Make this an x. Okay, so there is no x-intercept at this point. Now your y-intercept, there is one right here. Okay, I put that point right there. Okay, so that point, okay, if we go start at 0, we're at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be 0, 4. So again, this one does have a y-intercept. Okay, so now what is the correlation of this? Okay, is the question. Is there a correlation? Well, it doesn't go upwards and it doesn't go downwards, but it goes straight across the line. So there is no correlation with this one. Okay, no correlation. Okay, so again, if you have a situation where it's just a horizontal or vertical line, that would basically mean there's no correlation. And the reason why that is because the value is always going to be the same, right? So anytime that you move it over to X spot, the output's always going to be 4. So if you move it over 2, the output's always going to be 4, and it's always going to be 4. So there's no way of figuring out what's the correlation of any trend because the answer is always going to be 4 out of the whole thing. That's the idea. All right. So that would be how you would determine your x and y intercepts. And I think that's pretty easy to do and everybody can figure that out. Okay, so let's get a little harder here. All right, so now what we're going to do is we basically have to find the x and y intercept from the equation. Now, now remember what x and y intercept look like. The x portion is what we need to find when we need the x-intercept where it crosses, and the other portion is 0. Y-intercept is 0's in front where the x is, and now the y is what we need to find. Okay, so how do we find this from the intercept from the equation? Now, the equation that we're looking at is 2x minus 6y equals 6. Okay, so 2x minus 6y equals 6 is also in standard form. Okay, so this is what is called standard form. That means that ax plus by, sorry, that should be a y, my fault. Okay, that should be a y, by, okay, ax plus by equals cx. So what about this a, b, and c? Those are just basically means they're coefficients. That's all it is. So the coefficient of 2 would be a, okay, and the coefficient of the y would be negative 6, and the coefficient of x would be, of this x at the end would be 6, okay? So wait a minute, it's actually, sorry guys, I made another mistake. It shouldn't be cx, it just should be x. It should be c, okay? Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, so again, ax plus by equals c. So c would be the constant over which is 6 at the end. Now you can move that around into slope point slope form and all different kinds of so on, but right now we're going to focus on this. All right. So the question is, how do I determine the x and y intercept? Okay, from this equation right here. So let's think of what we know. Okay, to find the x-intercept, we know that we had a value in front for x, but we know that the value of y is going to be 0. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to substitute in for y 0. So it's going to be 2x minus 6 with the parentheses 0 equals 6. Okay? So now what happens to 6, 0? That cancels. We know that automatically because 6 times 0 is 0. So it becomes 2x minus 6. Now that becomes a one-step equation like we've done before. So we have to divide both sides by 2. So therefore, we know our x-intercept in this situation would be 3. Okay, and the coordinate point for that would be x-intercept, x-I-N-T, okay, 3 and 0, okay? Again, this is really easy, but once it's going to get harder. Once we start putting fractions in there and all that kind of stuff, because again, the slope stuff gets really hard when we start putting in fractions, okay? So don't think this is so easy. No, it's not, okay? All right, so now this is just the beginning part, okay? So y-intercept, so how would I do for the y-intercept? I do the same thing. I take my 0, plug that in for x, okay? And then I solve for y. That's all you have to do in that point, okay? Is now I'm just going to take that 0 and plug it in for y. So again, I got 2, 0 minus 6y equals 6. Okay, now from here, this cancels. We know that automatically. We divide by 6. Divide by 6. Okay, so y equals negative 1. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, and that would be the answer. Okay, so negative 1. Now, what is that? Negative 1 is the y-intercept. So therefore, if I wanted to actually graph that or make a coordinate point, okay, which you're probably going to have to do if when we have our little thing here, that you're going to have to basically put 0, negative 1, and that would be the point. And now you're done. So you have the x-intercept and you have the y-intercept, basically by plugging in a value of 0 for each portion of the equation. All right, so let's try another one here. Let's try another one here. So we have 2x minus 6y equals negative 6. So let's find the x-intercept first. Okay, and we put n x I n t. Okay. And then let's do 6, 0. I love when I say 0. 0. Okay. -6. Okay. All right. So we know this cancels. -6. Okay. So from here, -2. Okay. So again, all we do is want to divide by 2 on both sides. It's going to give us a value of 3. Okay, -3. So that would be the x-intercept, and that would be x-int. Let me write that down. I'm writing so slow. I don't know why. I'm cramping my hand here where I'm writing. You just write with a little bit of authority. Oh no. Sorry guys. I'm trying. It gets crazy on me some days. All right. So that would be x is -3. So that x-intercept would be -3, 0. Okay. So this is also setting you up for systems of equations, but I don't want to go into that because that'll confuse you. All right. So same thing now. Same thing for x. We're going to plug that in. We're going to plug in for the x-intercept. We plug in 0 for x, and then we solve for y. And we should get a value of 1. Because I'm just looking at it, I can tell. Okay. This cancels. Divide by -6. Divide by -6. Okay. And y equals 1. Okay. And that would be the answer. So y equals 1. So from there, then basically the y-intercept would be 1 and 0. Okay. I'm not going to put y-intercept because I think we get the understanding. Okay. So again, just plug it in the values of 0 and x, and that works perfectly. Okay. All right. So let's put it all together. Now let's find the value of x and y intercept, and then graph the line. So we have 2y. Well, that shouldn't be a y. That should be an x. Come on, McRae. Doing this last minute here. It should be an x. Boom, right there. Okay, so we have 2x plus 3y equals 12. So first is I want to find the y-intercept. I don't know why I do the y-intercept first. You could do either one. It doesn't matter. Okay, you're just plugging in 0. So it's just all about plugging in 0. All right. So this cancels, and I end up with 3y, and this divide by 3. Divide by 3. See where all this math starting to come together? Okay. So if you didn't know your two-step equations, you'd be hurting right now. Okay. So this would be 4. Okay. And what do we know about that? So that the y-intercept would be 0, 4. Okay. Because that's what the y-intercept is. It's always going to 0 on the front. So let's plot that. Let me put a y and t here because we gotta label our stuff. I gotta be a good role model and label our stuff. Okay. So y-intercept 0, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right here. Boom. That's 1. Okay. And then from there, we got another equation. Okay, so let's go 2x plus 3, 0. Okay. And then here. So then you miss that, and now you have 2x equals 12. And now from there, again, this is going to get much, much harder. So please don't think this is that easy. This is going to get much harder. Okay. So again, this is, so this cancels and this becomes x equals 6. Okay. 6. So then our x-intercept is 6, 0. Okay. Okay. So then I plot that. So let's go over. Let's start at the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Boom, right there. There it is. Okay. Now I connect my dots. Look at that. Wow, amazing. And then there, right there. And I make my other line here. Now, the real question is there a positive or negative relationship here? So just remember, looking left to right, it's going downward. So this is actually a negative relationship. You're like, what why? How is that negative? How is that a negative relationship? Okay. Again, it's maybe just because once we plug in certain values into the equation and we determine the slope, it might actually change the whole equation. So again, this would be a negative correlation at this point. Okay, looking left to right, it's going downwards. Now, looking at this situation of this equation, doesn't look like that's going to happen. But we'll talk about that as we go along. Why that one is a negative correlation, not a positive one. It. All has to do with turning an equation around to different to the slope intercept one. Okay, but we'll talk about it later. All right, peace now, guys. Good.